Air Canada Flight 797 soars high above the clouds, when suddenly, thick smoke fills the cabin. Electrical systems shut down.
You'll be making emergency landing. Put your head on your lap.
We're going to need...
The crew struggles to land the plane.
We're on Mayday. We're going down.
It's a life or death situation in what will become a fiery landing. June 2nd, 1983. It's dinner time on board Air Canada Flight 797. Captain Donald Cameron has been working for Air Canada for 17 years and has flown almost 5,000 hours on a DC-9.
How's your seafood? Nice?
His first officer, Claude Ouimet, has to finish his meal before the captain can eat. The jet is flying from Dallas, Texas to Montreal with a layover in Toronto. Heavy clouds below hide a few showers, but at a cruising altitude of 33,000 feet, the view is crystal clear. Today, the DC-9 is only half full, with 41 passengers scattered throughout the plane.
Can I have some tea, please?
24-year-old Diane Fadley is an active member of the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation.
We have a number of different fundraising activities, and once a year they have a large conference, and at this time it happened to be in Toronto.
Engineer Raymond Chalafaux is 23 and recently married. He's on his way home from a business trip.
It was a little bit frightening both for me and for my wife. I was supposed to be gone 4 or 5 days, so first time we were separated for a long period of time, so it was kind of insecure for me, yeah.
A few rows up sits folk musician Stan Rogers. He's only 33, but his career is taking off outside of his native Canadian homeland.
I think Stan's best-known songs celebrate ordinary people. The songs are really about ordinary people rising to the occasion and becoming heroes on their own.
Around 7 p.m., the plane is a little more than halfway to Toronto.
What was that? It's right there, I see it. Right there.
Yeah.
3 circuit breakers have popped out. Like fuses, they protect delicate electrical circuits on the plane from overloading.
Like a machine gun.
Yeah. Zap, zap, zap.
The 3 breakers control the flushing motor in the toilet at the rear of the plane. Cameron waits a few minutes before resetting them.
Someone must have pushed a rag down the toilet or something. Jammed it and it overheated.
Something has caused the motor to stop working, but Cameron doesn't think it's an emergency. Toilets get blocked all the time. As the plane continues on its course to Toronto, flight attendants Laura Kayama and Judy Davidson serve dinner in the cabin. In the cockpit, Captain Cameron is ready for his meal. But first, he resets the 3 circuit breakers again. Without them, the toilet won't work, and the flight could get uncomfortable for the passengers.
Pop says I push it.
He waits more than 8 minutes, but it doesn't fix itself. Back in the cabin, one of the passengers complains about a disturbing odor.
Yeah, there is a strange smell. Let me take a look.
Connie Kirsch, who's on her way to a business meeting in Toronto, is sitting at the back of the plane.
I had smelled a peculiar smell where I was sitting. And it struck me as odd. Actually, it was a wiry smell. It wasn't a smoke smell.
A wisp of smoke is leaking out of the bathroom. The smoke and acrid smell of burning plastic It takes Davidson by surprise. This may be more than just a blocked toilet. Soon other passengers notice the smoke and the suffocating smell.
Sergio, there's a problem in the washer. Judy says there's a fire.
Okay, I'll be right there.
Chief Flight Attendant Sergio Benetti is in charge of the cabin crew.
As a precaution, we're moving everyone through Rosa.
The smoke is overpowering. But Benetti doesn't see any flames. Still, he sprays the fire extinguisher into the tiny bathroom, covering every surface.
As soon as I saw that fire extinguisher, something went through my mind. There's definitely something wrong. The guy seemed to have the thing under control, so he's gonna do his job and things will be business as usual.
7:02 p.m. Only 11 minutes have passed since the circuit breakers first popped out. Laura Kayama gives Captain Cameron the disturbing news.
Excuse me, Captain. There's a fire in the washroom in the back. They just went back to go put it out.
You want me to go back?
Yeah, go.
A fire on board an aircraft is one of the worst situations a crew can face. A spark can turn deadly in a few short minutes, or possibly even seconds. But Captain Cameron doesn't know how serious the problem is.
You got to remember, in 1983, people were allowed to smoke in the aircraft. And there had been a number of incidents of this sort of in the industry. So it really didn't alarm me that much.
Ouimet finds the situation much worse than he expected.
I didn't see any flames when I opened the door before, but I sprayed it really good with the fire extinguisher.
You think it was a cigarette in the garbage?
No, not really.
Okay. Can't get back there. Smoke's too heavy. I think we'd better go down.
But Flight Attendant Sergio Benetti has a different assessment of the situation.
You don't have to worry. I think the smoke's easing up.
Captain Cameron has a tough decision to make.
Some components do fail from time to time that are not severe or serious enough to cause an emergency descent. That's a pretty serious thing.
When Ouimet and Benetti were at the back of the plane, the smoke was thick, but now it seems to be clearing up.
Okay, it's starting to clear now. But I'll go back and check if that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. Take these goggles. I'll leave my mask on. Go back wherever you can, but don't get yourself incapacitated.
No problem. No problem.
If it's just a broken motor, Cameron can still make it to Toronto. But if it's a more serious problem, he'll have to land immediately before the situation turns deadly. Air Emergency will continue in a moment. We now return to Air Emergency. June 2nd, 1983. Air Canada Flight 797 is on a routine trip to Toronto. But things on board have taken a turn for the worse. Smoke is gathering at the back of the DC-9, and an acrid smell is spreading through the cabin. The crew has already moved passengers toward the front of the plane, as far as possible from the creeping smoke. Captain Donald Cameron waits for an update from the back of the plane, when suddenly a new problem arises. The master warning light turns on, and electrical systems throughout the plane and in the cockpit start to fail.
The airplane basically lost all its sophisticated navigation and attitude information. So I was left very suddenly with, I think, 3 engine instruments per engine and 4 flight instruments, which were very primitive. They were what you might have flown a World War II bomber with.
With the electrical system shutting down, Cameron calls the nearest ground control.
Memphis Center, this is Air Canada 797.
Air Canada 797, Indianapolis Center. Go ahead.
Yeah, we've got an electrical problem here. We may be off communication shortly. Stand by.
Co-pilot Claude Ouimet is at the back of the plane. The bathroom door handle is hot, so he doesn't risk opening it. Faced with a potential fire on board, the crew has to land the plane as soon as possible.
I don't like what's happening. I think we'd better go down. We're going to be making an emergency descent. Brief the captain.
Yes, sir.
As soon as the decision is made, another warning light turns on. Their emergency power is failing.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
What was once a small problem is now a major emergency.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
This is Louisville Control, over.
Air Canada 797, we have a fire on board. We are going down.
Can you possibly make Cincinnati?
Roger that.
With Cincinnati only 30 miles away, Captain Cameron begins an initial descent to 5,000 feet. The crew turns on the emergency battery power, but many of the plane's instruments aren't functioning.
So all we had left was DC emer power, and that's only good for radios, basically.
Then Cameron discovers that another critical piece of the plane isn't working. The horizontal stabilizer on the tail of the DC-9, which keeps the plane at a cruising altitude, is frozen. Cameron uses the elevators to make the plane dive, but the aircraft isn't giving in. The controls push back with nearly 40 pounds of pressure.
The airplane became very heavy, and I took my total concentration to fly the airplane.
The smoke creeps forward from the back of the plane and slowly seeps in from the seams in the fuselage ceiling. It hovers like a cloud over the passengers' heads.
Incredibly harsh smoke that was really irritating your throat. You had to take really, really small breaths, otherwise you would choke.
I could have deployed the oxygen mask for the passengers, but it's forbidden. You're only allowed to use the oxygen mask in the case of a massive decompression or loss of cabin pressure, not for fire.
I was crying and scared. I wasn't hysterical. The gentleman sitting next to me explained to me that if I would not cry and if I could, conserve my, not breathe so fast, that it would conserve the oxygen, would help us, and not to worry, that the flight attendants, they really know how to handle these sort of situations.
As electrical malfunctions ripple through the plane, the PA system shuts down. Flight attendants shout directions, but it's getting harder and harder to breathe. In 1983, it's not standard procedure to tell passengers how to open the emergency doors. But in this case, the two flight attendants aren't taking any chances. And now, the smoke makes its way into the cockpit, and the captain's situation is critical. Co-pilot Ouimet calls the Cincinnati airport.
Approach Air Canada 797. We're on Mayday. We are going down.
Air Canada 797, Cincinnati approach. Planned runway 36 ILS. And the equipment has been alerted. You have time to give me the nature of the emergency.
We have a fire in the washroom. We're filling up with smoke right now.
Gregory Karam is the approach tower controller, the one who will help the troubled jet land. But he can't see the plane on his radar yet. 7:13 p.m. Karam finally sees Flight 797 on his radar.
Air Canada 797, you are now fully identified. This will be a no-gyro radar approach for runway 27 left. Descend now to 3,500 feet. Your position is now 1-2 miles southeast of the airport.
The crew needs to be guided in from the ground. With the dense smoke, they could easily veer off course. But Karam will talk them down, watching them every step of the way. In the cabin, the smoke and heat are unbearable.
My thought was, well, we're gonna crash. They won't be able to identify myself because I didn't have my papers with me, so I stood up, I took my wallet in the compartment and put my jacket on so that they could identify my body.
I knew at that point, that's when I decided, I felt that I was not going to make it because I felt I would never see my family again, and the situation just seemed very impossible.
Stan certainly had a sense of his own mortality, and he hated to fly. But the demand for Stan was growing, so he was flying more often. And he certainly had a sense that with so much traveling, his risk is elevated.
Finally, the crew sees the airport.
Okay, we have the airport.
The tower has you in sight. You need not acknowledge further transmission from the Air Canada 797. You are cleared to land. You are 4 miles from the airport. Good luck.
In the thick haze, flight attendants Laura Kayama and Judy Davidson try to reassure the passengers. But the smoke and heat keeps them from going past the 12th row.
I was praying the whole time. Dear God, please help us land this plane. Please get this plane safely on the ground.
I've been married for less than a year, and it's already over. So I started breathing as little as I could and start thinking seriously of my wife.
Stay tuned for more Air Emergency on the National Geographic Channel. Air Emergency now continues on the National Geographic Channel. Air Canada Flight 797 is filled with thick, suffocating smoke. In the cockpit, Captain Cameron prepares for an emergency landing in Cincinnati, but he's having a hard time with the controls. Squinting through the smoke, the crew positions the jet for landing. At 7:20 p.m., the Air Canada plane is on the ground. Less than 30 minutes have passed since the first sign of trouble on Flight 797.
When we touch the ground, I assume that we're safe now. Now let's get out of this airplane.
But inside the plane, the smoke isn't letting up. Passengers unfasten their seatbelts and try to escape.
I got up out of my seat, and I remember putting my hands up on someone's back, and it was like waiting in a line. And I knew that was one line. I didn't want to wait very long. So I turned around and went the other direction, not knowing I was actually heading towards the front of the plane.
Sergio Benetti is the first one to the door. He helps passengers escape. The cabin is pitch black and burning hot. In the cockpit, the crew quickly shuts down the plane. First Officer Claude Ouimet escapes through the emergency window, jumping 15 feet to the ground. Passengers have opened 3 of the overwing exits. But even with the doors open, the exits are hard to see through the thick smoke.
I saw a light, and it was the door that had opened. Someone had opened the door. I realized what it was, ran to the door, and held my help. I just put my face out so I could breathe.
Passengers slide off the wing and stumble to safety. On the ground, Laura Kayama shouts to passengers to move away from the deadly plane. Fire rescue vehicles douse the jet's exterior and the ground beneath it with foam to prevent a fuel fire or even an explosion. Through the cockpit window, we can see Captain Cameron sitting in his seat, slumped towards the wheel and looking dazed.
First thing that got my attention was to see Don's face in the window and realize that he was not completely conscious.
I couldn't get out of my seat. I'd start and I'd get my arse up in the air or like that, and I'd be pushed back by I have no idea, it was an invisible force, but it was probably smoke and fire.
In an attempt to save the captain's life, tells firefighters to cover him with foam.
It was this soapy, ice-cold mixture that drenched me.
It works. Cameron regains consciousness and climbs out through the cockpit window.
Stop! There he is! Stop!
Then, just 90 seconds after the plane lands, the whole interior of Flight 797 ignites. The flames rip through the cabin. Captain Donald Cameron is the last person to escape.
We knew there were people in the airplane, unfortunately, at that point. That was finished.
The cabin fire breaks through the top of the fuselage. Black smoke can be seen for miles. Laura Kayama counts the passengers.
I will remember these words forever. She told us to line up so that she could count the survivors. If there were survivors, obviously they were dead.
Including the crew, there were 46 people on board. But 46 people aren't on the runway.
I really thought that if the pilot could land the plane, we would all get off. But I knew when I looked around, I didn't think we were all there.
The passengers who escaped the plane suffer from smoke inhalation and minor injuries, but no one is badly hurt.
It was almost like if you got off the plane, nothing was wrong. I mean, there was maybe a sprained ankle, maybe someone had a broken arm or something. You made it and you were completely fine, or you didn't make it.
The young man next to me that helped me with my breathing techniques didn't survive. That was a real tough blow, because I know, for one, I believe he played a big part in my survival.
I guess it was around midnight. I decided to call Air Canada. I said, I'm trying to find out if a friend of mine was on this flight in Cincinnati. And she said, are you a member of the family? I said, no, I'm just a close friend. And she said, do you know if his wife is alone? And I said, well, yes. And she said, well, she may need somebody with her.
Rising musician Stan Rogers didn't make it off the plane.
Cincinnati ground. This is Captain of the Air Canada flight that's on fire here.
Captain Cameron radios Cincinnati ground control from an emergency vehicle near his plane. He has a sobering message.
Seems there are 23 people left on board the aircraft. Is there a scheduled carrier runs into here that could maybe give aid and shelter to our stranded passengers? It's pretty cold out here.
What started as a simple electrical problem ultimately claims the lives of 23 people. What caused the deadly fire? A look into the investigation will uncover the plane's history and the fact that this accident wasn't the first for the Air Canada DC-9. Air Emergency will return in a moment. You're watching Air Emergency. In June of 1983, a strange smell in the back of Air Canada Flight 797 quickly turns into a major emergency. For 15 minutes, passengers and crews struggle to deal with toxic smoke as it fills the plane. The DC-9 made a remarkable landing, only to burst into flames 90 seconds later. "23 people perish on board. The burned shell of the DC-9 sits on the runway at the Greater Cincinnati Airport. It's one of the most disturbing airplane disasters in years. And within the hour, investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board are on the scene. The first grim task is to recover the bodies of the dead. 21 Canadians and 2 Americans. Many are burned beyond recognition. Several of the victims are found in the front half of the plane, between the wings and the cockpit. Some are still strapped in their seats, while others are found in the aisles. Even though all the passengers were moved up earlier in the flight, 2 bodies are found near the rear, beyond the wings. Investigators take blood samples from the bodies. They find deadly levels of chemicals produced by the burning plane.
When we did toxicological studies, we were able to determine that there were some significant high levels of cyanide and fluoride in the blood, as well as carbon monoxide.
It's unknown if the toxic fumes killed the passengers. Still, they were unable to escape the plane before it was engulfed in flames.
When I went on board, I was just struck by the acrid smell. It was kind of eerie because there was a lot of fire damage. A lot of the fuselage was burned. You know, the interior of the cabin was burned down to the tops of the seats.
With the bodies removed, investigators dig through the wreckage to find the cause of the fire. Members of the FBI help with the investigation.
They were investigating to determine whether terrorism might have been a factor, so they were on scene right away looking at the aircraft to make that determination.
The FBI examines pieces of the plane's floor, samples of water from the bathroom, and a plastic vial found on the floor.
They determined that there was no evidence of any crime being committed. It was probably accidental ignition. And so they then left, and NTSB took over the accident.
Knowing that the fire wasn't set on purpose, investigators considered the next obvious cause, a cigarette. When smoking on planes was still allowed, most fires ignited in bathroom trash cans. Investigators examine the trash container and find the top burned away. But the trash chute and container behind and below the sink are intact. Inside are scorched remnants of paper, but they're not burned, so the fire didn't start here. With the most obvious potential causes dismissed, investigators start to comb through the wreckage in search of a cause for the fire. Studying the history of the plane, Hill uncovers some startling facts. In the year before the accident, 76 separate maintenance issues had been written up in the plane's logbook. All were dealt with, but it's an unusually high number of problems. And the plane's troubled history didn't end there. 4 years earlier, the rear bulkhead had failed, causing an explosive decompression. The crew had to make an emergency landing.
It knocked out a lot of electrical cable and hydraulics and stuff like that, and the guy did a hell of a job bringing it back to Boston.
The plane was repaired and put back into service, but Hill turns his focus to the wires that were stitched together after the accident. A bad repair job could have caused the fire.
There were wires that ran through there that had been cut, spliced back together.
Investigators study every wire splice on Flight 797 that wasn't destroyed in the fire. But there's no evidence of arcing or short-circuiting. It's another dead end. They turn their attention to the cockpit voice recorder and the popping circuit breakers.
What was that? It's right there, I see it. Right there.
Yeah.
Like a machine gun. Yeah. Zap, zap, zap.
The circuit breakers trip as a precaution. When they overheat, they turn off, cutting electrical current to the motor. It's a safety feature to keep the motor from causing a fire.
Pops as I push it.
Were the breakers tripped by a fire that had already started, or was the motor the problem? The NTSB builds a replica of the plane's bathroom and forces the flush motor to seize. It reaches a temperature of 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot, but not hot enough to ignite parts of the bathroom around the motor. As they listen to the cockpit voice recorder, investigators uncover a puzzling clue. 3 minutes before the circuit breakers popped, the recorder picks up a static-like sound of electrical arcing, repeating 8 times. The noises aren't audible to the crew. Despite countless hours of investigation and numerous tests, there isn't enough evidence for the NTSB to pinpoint the exact cause of the fire. But one thing they can figure out is how the fire caused so much damage. There was heat and smoke, but no one saw any flames until the explosion ripped through the jet.
When you have a fire that has incomplete combustion, when it has a lack of oxygen, they will produce combustible gases. Those gases then can collect, especially in the crown of an aircraft.
The fire burned out of sight behind the bathroom walls, and the smoke, hot gases, and fumes intensified, spreading inside the wall space to the cabin. The spaces acted like chimneys for the gases and smoke. Although the fire remained concealed behind the walls and ceiling panels, the smoke and gases entered the cabin through every seam, gathering in the upper space and pressing down on the passengers. When the doors were opened during the evacuation, an unlimited supply of oxygen was suddenly available to feed the fire. The more intense the heat, the more oxygen hungry a fire can get. The gases ignited with the force of an explosion.
Once you have a flashover, you produce heat, toxic gases, and you burn up all the oxygen in the cabin, and it becomes non-survivable.
The technical part of the investigation is complete. But questions remain about how the crew responded to the fire.
The first officer says it's starting to clear now, and at that point I reckoned that the fire was under control.
Could the crew have done more to prevent the tragedy on board Air Canada Flight 797? Stay tuned for the conclusion of Air Emergency. And now, the conclusion of Air Emergency. In 1983, a bathroom fire on an Air Canada DC-9 fills the plane's cabin with smoke. The crew struggles to land the plane, but a flash fire rips through the jet moments after it comes to a stop. 23 people are killed.
There was a fireman hollering at us. I think the quote was, "She could blow at any minute."
NTSB investigators are unable to pinpoint the cause of the lethal fire. But after reviewing each piece of information, they published their report on Air Canada Flight 797, a year after the accident. It's a landmark in aircraft safety, but it makes for controversial headlines. The NTSB points out that the source of the smoke was never identified by the flight attendants or the first officer. The captain was never told, nor did he inquire, as to the precise location and extent of the fire that had been reported to him.
With that in mind, what type of fire did you believe that you had?
The bin fire.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday.
And the report also sparks another question.
Canada 797, we have a fire on board. We are going down.
Can you possibly make Cincinnati?
Roger that.
If Cameron had descended sooner, could he have landed at Standiford Field Airport in Louisville, Kentucky, which was a few minutes closer? The report and media attention devastates Captain Cameron and his crew. There's an outcry among pilots in the industry who resent the report's implied criticism of Flight 797's crew and the suggestion that they could have begun their descent 5 minutes sooner. Several months later, the Airline Pilots Association submits a petition that defends Cameron and his crew. Then the NTSB releases a revised report, including the petition by the Airline Pilots Association. In the petition, First Officer We Met defends their decision to land the plane where and when they did. The issue wasn't only the distance to the nearest airport, but also the required rate of descent. As it was, the plane barely made its descent to the greater Cincinnati airport. Still, the National Transportation Safety Board's revised summary doesn't back down. It continues to blame Captain Cameron. The report states that the time taken to evaluate the nature of the fire and the decision to initiate an emergency descent contributed to the severity of the accident. 20 years later, the statement still stings.
I'm glad they were all, the people that got off. I'm very sorry that the people that didn't get off, because we spent a lot of time and effort getting them there. That really bothered me. All I know is that I did the best I could.
In addition to the comments on the crew's performance, the NTSB recommends a multitude of safety improvements. If it had been a full flight, someone may have smelled the smoke sooner. At the same time, the bathroom could have had a smoke detector installed. But they weren't standard throughout the industry. After the Air Canada Flight 797 accident, those attitudes and regulations changed. Even though flight attendants received some training in dealing with fires, it wasn't enough. And what was more obvious, the flight attendants weren't properly equipped to attack fires. Without full face masks and oxygen, they couldn't fight fire while holding their breath. In the years after Flight 797, attendants received better equipment and training. The cabin crew had acted fast, making quick decisions that helped save lives. Moving passengers to the front of the airplane and handing out wet towels minimized the effects of the toxic smoke. Telling passengers to open the emergency exits over the wings wasn't standard procedure, but it allowed some passengers to escape more quickly and was eventually adopted as routine practice. And finally, it was obvious from the location of some of the bodies that passengers died trying to find the exits in the dark. After the accident, track lighting on the floors and bumps along the overhead bins identifying the emergency exit rows would eventually become standard.
As a direct result of 797, a number of rules were changed, including a more stringent test for seats, a heat release and smoke requirement for cabin interior panels, requirement for smoke detectors in lavatories, and halon fire extinguishers in the cabin.
But the changes were too late for those who died on Flight 797, including the man sitting beside Connie Kirsch. Months after the crash, his wife contacted Connie.
She said, I just understand my husband was the one that was next to you, and I just wanted to know how was he? What was his spirits? And I said, he was in great spirits. He's very nice. He let me sit next to him and explained to me how to breathe. That was really difficult, you know, and the guilt that I carried for a long time was difficult. But I'm past the guilt, but I guess when you go back to it and you think about it like this in detail, you're right back there.
Stan Rogers was another victim of Flight 797. He would never be able to fulfill the promise of his life and growing career.
I loved his generosity and his loyalty as a friend. As an artist, he was perhaps one of the best songwriters this country's ever produced, and it was really an incredible pleasure and honor to be working with him. He still gets lots and lots of airplay, and so his legend grows.
After the accident, 2 Air Canada employees visit Diane Fadley at her home in Dallas.
They brought my Bible. It's dark because it was burned and singed, but it's a paperback Bible, and it did not completely burn up. This is just a reminder to me that God was with me. And I believe He protected me. And, you know, He was there with me.
Captain Cameron and his crew eventually received 6 separate awards for their heroic actions on Flight 797, including recognition from the Royal Canadian Air Force. But they're still haunted by the nightmare.
You feel responsible, there's no question. You feel guilt, you're willing to give your license, you feel very, very small until you get all the facts together, because it's a puzzle for you. You know, you're as much as a victim in this. You're not supposed to fly an airplane in that condition. You know, so you're as much as a victim as the passenger, and I think it becomes all of our problem, and we're all part of the solution.
It's just a shame we didn't get everybody off. It still bothers me.